November 1st, what we're going to spend the next hour or so on, we're going to try something a little bit different. If you have heard of these books, maybe you have or have not read them, but if you've heard of them, we're going to try taking two similar themed books, same topic, but maybe sort of different perspectives, and we're going to mash them up today. So whether you've read them or not, the goal is for us to tackle in an hour. Today, we're going to talk about habits. I want to deliver to you sort of the best and oldest moments of these two books. And I'm just going to remind everybody, if you could mute, I'm going to go through the list and just make sure. We're going to talk about the sort of the best moments, the top bullet points of these two books. And hopefully today too, the idea and the timing of this training is intentional. Going into the end of the year, it's a natural point where you're maybe taking pause, reviewing what you've done in business this year, examining what you want to accomplish next year. And it may be in other areas of life too, not just in your real estate business, but it could be in other areas as well. So the timing of this, like I said, is very intentional. So hopefully you'll hear some of the messaging today that's coming out of these two reads, and you'll see some action items there. I'll highlight in a couple of places where there are clear takeaways that you can literally hang up at 11 with us, and you can turn around and get to work actually doing some of the work, handling some of the action items to make a difference in how habits impact your day-to-day experience, impact your results, and hopefully ultimately build your level of effectiveness, satisfaction, and success. Okay? So let's talk the two books we're going to talk about today, all around habits. You've got the uber classic, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You're talking about a publication that's over 30 years old, close to 35 years old, has gone through a couple of new editions, most recently just a few years ago in 2020. And then you've got the new classic, Atomic Habits, which is right around the corner from or maybe it just celebrated its 5-year anniversary. So you've got sort of the old school thought and the newer school of thought all around habits. So we're going to tackle each of these individually. And again, as we go through them, I'm going to tell you, hey, pay attention. Here's an action item that you can take away from our conversation today. If at any point anybody wants to share and jump in, feel free. You could use the chat, but even more so, just unmute and throw a comment or a question out there. Okay? So let's start. I've reviewed both of these books in depth. And like I said, I'm just trying to bring you the 60-minute highlight so that if you haven't had a chance to read them, if it's been a while, that you could still find value in the content without having to necessarily go and read them. So let's look at the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Stephen Covey spent his time preparing this book when he wrote it in the late 1980s. He looked at over 200 years of literature. He really focused on what was being published around self-help, around personal success, around growth and development. And it's very interesting to me. He kind of took the time period, like right around the signing of the Declaration of Independence, and took it up to sort of modern day, that kind of 200-year period. And what he found was that the time between the signing of the Declaration of Independence and right up until around World War I, the theme was very consistent. Sort of the underlying tenets of everything around growth and personal development had to do with character traits. That people who exhibited, high levels of effectiveness in achieving their goals and feeling successful, they had certain common character traits. Right around the time of World War I, that shifted and went to more of personality traits. So you could see here on the screen, like when we talk about character, what he was looking at was he was seeing themes of integrity, of patience, loyalty, having courage, common traits. But then after World War I, it became more about public image. And that public image may or may not have been in tune with those character traits. But he was more apt to see sort of manipulative or shallow or superficial qualities around personal growth and development, which I think is very interesting. Because I feel like, too, that was a big shift in our culture politically around, the high level figures that you would see in our nation's history around, sort of what were the guiding principles that our elected officials were sort of motivated by. And I do think if you are a history buff, you'll see a bit of a shift there. So it's very interesting to me that from a growth and development stage, Covey picked up on this. He really, in his book, concentrates and is trying to sort of restore your mindset back to that character ethic. So when he's talking about the 7 habits, you're going to see and sort of feel underlying those same tenets: integrity, patience, consideration, patience and courage, and humility. All will be sort of underlying themes. So what exactly are those 7 habits? Let's take a look at what they, let's take a look at what they are. So here on the screen, you'll see: be proactive, begin with the end in mind, put first things first, think win-win, seek first to understand, then to be understood. Pretty sure that's a song. Synergize and sharpen the saw. So you're like, okay, I really, just at face value, don't necessarily know or feel like there's a giveaway on what each or any of these habits really means. When I took a look at them, especially in preparing for today, what I found helpful is to sort of group these into certain segments, subsegments of the 7. So let's talk about the first one, being proactive. This is the foundation. This is at the heart of what Covey's message in this publication was, that at the end of the day, what you're doing, the habits you're creating, the actions, the routines that you're creating in your life are yours to own, that you need to take personal responsibility for the choices that you're making, how you're spending your time, how you're setting goals, and then the steps that you're taking to work towards those goals, and owning the process, owning the decision, and recognize that while life hands us challenges and curveballs, things that we don't expect and things we can't control, there's a tremendous amount in our day-to-day choices that we can control. So at the heart of his 7, habits, the first one is highly effective people own their decisions, own and are responsible for the day-to-day choices that they're making. Okay, so think about that. Habits 2 and 3, this is my first sort of clumping together. And anybody I just did a business plan event with a good number of people on my team locally. And this is a theme that you're going to hear from me. I feel like these 2 habits go hand in hand. First one, begin with the end in mind. That's habit number 2. And then number 3, putting first things first. Here's the deal. Covey felt very strongly that successful minded people, that people who were effective, again, if the goal is to set goals, move towards those goals, and feel a certain level of satisfaction in your life, that you needed to have a vision and a mission for what your life broadly, big picture, was going to look like. Is that something that you have in your life today? Have you ever, and again, doesn't just have to be real estate, although that's sort of our, that's obviously our primary focus here with this training, but do you have a vision and a mission statement on paper for what you're looking to achieve in your business or in your life or in another aspect of your professional world? Okay. He says, get it on paper and think both short-term and long-term. But this is a huge step in accountability to make sure that by putting it on paper, you are taking that next step towards being effective in achieving your goals. When I talk about business planning, one of the biggest reasons that I sort of advocate for creating a vision and a mission statement is because if you understand at your core who you want to be, who your ideal you is, what you want to accomplish, then when you face opportunities along the way to either invest in a new system or new, say like a new lead gen program, or you have to make a decision, you have X number of marketing dollars, how do you spend them? If you only have so much time in your week to devote to your real estate business, if you have that big picture goal on paper, then when you're faced with those sort of fork in the road decisions, it becomes a lot easier to make the right decision when you decide if those different pathways line up appropriately with what your big, long-term, this is my ideal looks like. Okay. So those, again, two huge habits of highly effective people: having vision and mission on paper, and then using your vision and mission to prioritize how you're spending your time and what actions you're partaking in. He came up with something called a time management matrix. And I think we can all appreciate this, but he recognized that if you look at your day, you can look at all of the activities that you participate in on a scale of importance and a scale of urgency. Here's the deal. The most effective people, and again, effective meaning not necessarily having to have insane level goals. We're talking about people who are setting manageable goals, defining their ideal, and what is ideal to you in your world is going to be different from the next person's ideal in their world. So there's no wrong answer, but it's about defining what that is and then taking steps to effectively move closer toward that ideal and to be content with your progress. Okay, so that's what we mean by effective. So people who are effective moving towards their ideal spend more time in this area here, quadrant 2. That is the space where you are doing things that are important around that ideal, but are not urgent. In other words, you can slow the world down, take your time, and give full attention, full focus, and energy to those action items, to your plan for how you want to achieve your desired success or your desired state. We all operate in moments of emergency. You're not going to eliminate that in life. We said before, you're going to have curveballs. They're going to come at you, and you can't eliminate that. Those are things that are out of your control. So each one of us, in all reality, is going to spend time in quadrant 1. There will be times where you're putting out fires. But the idea is that the more time you spend in quadrant 2, in sort of a calm space, the more adept you are at handling and adapting to things that are, flying at you in quadrant 1. The other thing is, if you look at the quadrants 3 and 4, things that are less important but vary in urgency, these are total time wasters. They suck your time and they suck your energy, and almost in a sense can send you in a negative direction when you're trying to move towards your ideal. Okay. So it's having a certain level of awareness. So here's the first thing that I would say in terms of action item coming out of today. If you don't have your vision and mission for what you're trying to achieve, particularly in real estate, that's something that you want to work on. Give some thought to that. Okay. Get it on paper. Vision and mission, just as an aside, the way that I talk about it in business planning, those are living, breathing statements. It's not something that you create today and then it's set in stone and can't be changed. Your life changes, your goals change, your business evolves, and those statements should be living, breathing reflections of how you experience change over time. But the idea is that they're sort of your grounding mechanism in the middle of your business. As you're working through what that vision and mission looks like, make sure that you're kind of in the back of your mind thinking, how much time am I spending on my business every day in each of these areas? Am I spending way too much time here in the yellow, in the crisis mode? And how do I get myself to more of a calm, big picture planning mode? Okay. Again, the more time you spend here, the less time you're devoting to other quadrants. Okay. And remember, any thoughts on that, feel free to unmute and jump in. The next grouping, moving towards our 7 effective habits, these 3 I think are very interesting. And I appreciate these in particular because I'm not just coming at this from a professional perspective, but I thought of this a lot from a personal and parenting perspective too. All of these 3 habits, 4, 5, and 6, all relate you, your experience, and your choices to other people and their experiences and choices. And again, maybe because it's my parenting and trying to work with young people today, I find that it can be a little bit challenging to get the young person's mind to think beyond themselves. And a part of that, I believe, is maturity. But I think a part of that too is a factor of social media and maybe how technology has come into play with our behaviors. But these 3 habits are all about you in relation to other people. Hey, Lynette, how are you?
Hi, Diana. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Deanna, I'm sorry. I'm
You're
doing
good.
things here.
I'm good. I go
Okay,
by a lot of things.
doing things. I guess I find interesting when you speak about young people, and not just young people, the effects of automation. I think that so many people are depending on, quote, the system, unquote, to handle things that people are less likely to think things through. I don't know if that's
That's a
been your.
great point. Yeah, I think that's a tremendous point. And the ever increasing use of technology and automation do remove sort of the interpersonal component of the work that we do. And it's up to us. And that's why I think these habits in particular are so refreshing to see on paper because they're at the heart. If you are on the Tuesday masterminds, and you listen to Christian and Chris and Jean, and they talk about it so frequently. Almost every week you hear, we are in a relationship business. Don't hide behind the screen. Get out and talk to people. Let them know the service that you provide. And that's what these habits are exactly talking about. And so much of the themes that I see Tuesday to Tuesday are reflected here, not necessarily referencing back to this book, but so what are they? Think win-win. So looking for mutual benefit in the interactions that you have with others, really truly focusing on the relationship. And what I love is the abundance mentality. I've talked with so many agents over the course of the last 20 years who might struggle with certain aspects of real estate because they struggle with the mindset of a salesperson. Like, I'm not comfortable in a sales skin. But what if you really took on the mindset and sort of the skin of a person of service and a person of abundance, that you have something to offer the world, that you're not trying to sell yourself so much as you're trying to share your service, your support, your knowledge, your expertise. If you come from a place of abundance, then I think the way that you deliver your message and the message itself will both land way more effectively. And it all goes back to relationship. So that's win-win, that you can help someone else and that could be good for you and good for them. Seek to understand, then to be understood. This is huge because I think as a society, we listen a lot less than we used to. This one is all about listening, giving respect and appreciation to the other person's viewpoint, feeling, perspective before sharing your own. That's a huge component of trust. So think of what we're talking about here in these 3 habits of the mentality of relationship building, building trust, establishing rapport, and then creating synergies. Habit number 6 is to synergize, having that mindset that if 1 + 1 is more than 2, then why would we not want to partner? Why would we not want to work together to enjoy something more than 2 when our efforts and our activities come together? It's the whole idea of teamwork. So I love these 3 habits. And exactly to your point, Lynette, it's getting us back to the roots of human nature, I think, which I really enjoyed in Covey's book overall. Anybody have a comment about those three? Other thoughts on those? No? Okay, good. So give some thought to uh, maybe exactly to Lynette's point. What's happening in your world today? That, what are your daily habits where you're pouring into all of these different opportunities to build connection and build rapport? And then finally, what's the last one? I love this one too, because we hear it a lot, I think, in the world today, especially because the conversation has really stepped up around mental health and mental well-being. But remember that Covey first wrote this book, 35 years ago, when I don't think the conversation was nearly as prevalent around self-care. And that's habit number 7, is essentially rooted in self-care, sharpening the saw. Take care of yourself, build in time for your own personal development, and not just in the guise of professional development, but in other aspects as well. Being physically well, being emotionally well, even spiritually well, finding opportunities outside of what your profession is to take care of yourself, which I think is a great theme too. So again, going back to, if we look over time, 200 years of literature, what he's saying is these 7 habits are the habits that were exhibited by those who showed the most success in setting and achieving goals. Okay. So what is the big takeaway from this book? I think is that, again, that refreshing reminder that habits, actions, activities, routines are not things that you should be doing in isolation. That the greatest opportunity for enjoyment and effectiveness in your habit space is when you have consideration for other people, and when you see that you can have an impact positively on them as well as yourself by creating good habits. Okay, so I think that's the big takeaway, the underlying takeaway from Covey's book. Anybody else? Has anybody read this book, or even maybe looked at it more than once since it was first published? And has it affected you in any way, in the way that you approach your routine?
Diana,
Hi, Inez.
hi, how are you?
How are you?
This book, I did it last night. I listened to the YouTube,
Okay.
and everything becomes just do it. Be nice. Do it. Don't think too much about it. Just socialize. Just go out there. Talk to people. And don't think too much. Just like the Nike, just do it.
Just do it.
You will get so much more. You hear the clock, you get up. Don't press the snooze button. Just do it. And so, and most people probably here understand that these are real things, and but they don't get to implement as well. So it's just get the first step, get the next step, and keep on going.
Yep. I think and you'll see a little bit as we talk about the second book, Atomic Habits. I think that really is going to give you, so Covey takes a very sort of, what's the word I want? Traditional, right? Like going back decades, even centuries, in sort of thought process to remind us of these huge, important tenets of life. And I almost feel like he maybe anticipated how our world might shift and how society might continue to change and evolve when he wrote this book. So it would be a resource for people to sort of always come back to center. But it is, his book really, I feel like, gives us that big picture mindset. And then what I love about pivoting to Atomic Habits is that James Clear really starts to say, okay, here's the science of habits, and let's talk about, like, literally 1 step, 2 step, 3 step that you can change or tweak in your world to make a difference, to move away from habits that don't serve you well and move toward habits that do. So I definitely appreciate what you're saying, for sure. Just do it. Get off the sidelines and get into the game, if you will. Hey, Lynette, you had a comment?
Also, James Clear, if you get on his mailing list, he has a daily, uh, kind of very short, gets to the point on his thoughts. And I think also that COVID, for me anyway, has caused me to become more isolated. And I was kind of always a loner, so to speak, believe it or not. I was never the
I'm
social one.
surprised. I'm surprised by that. I am.
But I found I've had to get back out there, so to speak.
Yeah.
And also a daily schedule I found to be more important because it's easy for me to kind of drift off into my own personal la la land.
Well, and I think probably that's a great point, Lynette, is that well, certainly with COVID. So let's talk about that for a minute, because I think even the most outgoing and extroverted of people have felt the effects of COVID, right? And that's not something, and going back to Inez's point, recognizing that it's had its effect should only take so much of your time. Now it's time to, let's pivot and talk about how you get going again. Recognize that it's had its effect, but don't stay stuck in that thought. The next thought should be, how do we build habits that help us move away from that rut, or help us move away from that introverted, comfortable space that we've nestled into a little bit in these last couple of years. The other thing is what you're touching on, and James Clear does have a number of resources, as does Stephen Covey online, but there are a number of resources. You can do the email, certainly, and his website has a lot of resources as well if you really wanted to dive into this more. But the idea with James Clear is that, and here's again, we're going to come upon more action items that you can immediately take away from our conversation today. What aspect of my day-to-day life do I want to sort of dissect and look at under a microscope and effectuate some change? Okay. So let's introduce the book. And I'm excited, Sarah, that you've got the book and are going to read one or both of these. Again, if you are not into reading the books, there's nothing that says that you have to coming out of today. The idea was to share some, I think, really cool information at a time when we need to take greater ownership of our habits, good and bad, and recognize that we have opportunity right within ourselves to make those changes. Okay. So why atomic? What's the word? When I first heard the title, Atomic Habits, honestly, I'm thinking atomic bomb. So I'm thinking about something big and huge and monumental. But really the idea behind the word atomic in Atomic Habits is that, think of the atom, the smallest particle of space, that when you bring atoms together, they build elements, right? And then they compound to grow something larger. So he's looking for the tiny. He's not looking for the monumental. His overall theme is work for tiny moments of change that as you repeat them and repeat them and repeat them, you're going to gain traction. And then when you layer on that next tiny moment of change, that the layers, the repetition, and the longevity of those changes are what are going to give you the greatest success. Okay. He makes a really great point. And I think this is helpful, a helpful reminder for all of us in this moment as we start to, as you come up with your action items, remember something. Winners and losers have the same goals. The difference is that the winners employ habits that help them effectively move toward their goals. So what does that mean? Everybody shows up to the field with the hope of winning the game. But what are the habits of the winning team and the habits of the losing team that make the difference in the result? It's the same idea here, that all of us here on this call can have the same or similar goals, right? That we all maybe want to achieve certain success or experience certain personal fulfillment. They could all look very similar on paper. That doesn't mean that that's just because we all share similar intentions that we're all going to get there. It's about the effort that each of us is putting in those small ways that continue to build and compound that's going to get us closer to our ideal. Okay, so here we go. We're going to come upon another action item for you to take away. So remember, Steve Covey says, go and build your vision statement and your mission statement. Mission being sort of what you stand for in the moment today, vision being a little bit more about what your ideal is, what you're moving toward. Now let's take a look at your habit scorecard. I'm not going to ask for anybody to share any information about their own scorecard. This is an exercise for you to participate in for yourself, for your own benefit. I think that it would be overwhelming to try and sit down and mark out your entire routine, start to finish in a day. But think about broadly as you're imagining habits. Even if it's subconsciously, I think each of us is thinking about a certain part of our day where we're not satisfied with the routine, that we feel like maybe we're falling short or walking through mud, that it's slowing us down from being effective and from moving closer towards our goals. So if you think about what that part of your day or that part of your routine is, start there and come up with a scorecard. Here was an example. This is the sort of widely used example that the author uses in the book. He talks about morning routine. So he says, first, go and list all of the activities that you are partaking in, every habit, and look how minuscule some of these are, like literally writing down, get dressed, turning off the alarm. Be that detailed in that segment of your day. And then once you've identified what the actions are, go back and score them. Give them a plus if it's a good habit, if it's something that you feel helps move you towards your goals for the day. If it's a bad habit, if it's something that is slowing you down in your day, or neutral, something that you don't have a good or bad opinion on. It's important that you recognize that this is very specific to you and how you map out your routine and how you score your activities is going to look totally different from the next person. Okay. For one person, take a look at, for example, weighing myself. For one person, that could be a positive. That could be a good thing. Maybe you're working towards weight loss and you have certain goals. And so weighing yourself is an important accountability moment for you in your day. But for someone else who maybe spends too much time focused on weight, that could be an activity that you might score as a negative, that it's a habit that you want to pull away from because you're giving it too much thought, too much energy, too much importance in your day. Get dressed. That's sort of a neutral, it's got to happen kind of thing. So, nobody's going out of the house buck naked. So that's why in this example, you would identify that maybe as a neutral action, but that could have a different meaning to someone who maybe has to dress a certain way or have a certain uniform in order to prepare for their day. Okay, so start with that one certain part of your day where you feel like you have the greatest opportunity. For me personally, I think that I would say that the place I would start with is my early morning routine. And I would do something similar here, and I would score that day. But again, each of us is different. As you move through that activity and you take a look at where you have positives, where you have negatives, those are the places where you're acknowledging, I feel like I have good habits, or I feel like I have bad habits. And that's where we're really going to start to get into the nitty gritty with this second book, with Atomic Habits, is how do we enhance the positives and how do we diminish the negatives, okay, to get closer to where we want to be. Clear talks about what he describes as a habit loop, that there's a cue, there's a craving, there's a response, and there's a reward. And this all happens over time. And we either let that loop continue or we alter some of these either cues or cravings or adjust our rewards to create a different behavior. So let me give you a couple of examples. Let's talk about the phone, because the phone can be a hot topic when we're talking about habits. Let's say your cue is you hear the notification sound of your phone telling you that you have a new message, a new text message, or a new email. That might be your cue, your trigger. The craving might be the curiosity or the anxiety, the desire to know what that new message or that new notification is about. Okay, so cue and craving. The response, behavior, is you actually opening the phone, taking the phone and opening it to see what that notification is all about. And then the reward, that's sort of the physical and mental satisfaction that your mind feels and that your body feels, almost like the dopamine rush, which is, again, remember, James Clear looked at this from a scientific perspective. So he was looking at factors, physical factors like dopamine release in the body to demonstrate reward. So if you're looking back at your habits and you're saying, well, the phone is a negative habit for me, then how do we tweak one of these 4 quadrants to get a different response, to get a different behavior? That maybe we're spending too much time on our phone. So what can we do in that case? Probably the greatest impact that you can have in making a change would be to go back to the cue, having the phone nearby, having an audible notification as opposed to a silent notification. Having the phone within, viewpoint is maybe not good. If I'm trying to teach this training and I have my phone in sight and it's a constant, distraction, if those are the habits, if I'm specifically exploring the habits of this training, then I want to look at that as a negative and figure out how can I eliminate that as a bad habit. Well, if I eliminate the phone from view, or I remove it from my office, or I put it in my bag, turn off my notifications, turn off my the sound on the phone, those are all things that I can change on the cue to avoid the behavior, that negative, that minus behavior that I'm trying to eliminate or move away from. Okay. So taking this habit loop idea to the next level, as you look at your habit scorecard, what James talks about is there are things that you can do, very specific minded things that you can do to enforce or create more of those plus behaviors and move away from or eliminate those minus behaviors. And I'm going to give you some examples. Okay. Here are these are like his sort of 4, he calls them, I'm trying to think, he uses a specific word that's escaping me at the moment, but he looks at these 4 quadrants and then looks at, these are called their inversions. Okay. So let's talk about making it obvious. Obvious would be if my ultimate goal is to drink more water in the day. And I know we talked about this not too long ago with somebody on our team. How do you make it obvious? You make the habit filling the water bottle and having it in front of you every day. So that instead of just having the goal of drinking more water, you're inserting a habit that gets you closer to that by making it obvious, putting it in front of you. Maybe it's about putting your clothes out the night before, or packing your bag the night before, putting the lunchbox on the counter the night before, doing things in a way that it puts it in front of your face. Okay. Putting the fruit bowl, setting a fruit bowl on the counter and filling it with fruit so that if it's in front of you, as opposed to hidden or out of sight, you are more likely to participate in that good habit. On the flip side of that, if you feel like you have a negative on your list, how do you remove it from sight? If, junk food in your day, if you're trying to eat more healthy, we talked about putting the fruit basket on the counter, but what about removing the junk food? Whether it's removing it from your shopping cart, removing it from your pantry, but getting it out of sight, where it's not sort of in your peripheral. So it's not something that you're likely to give thought or action to. The next thing, for positive, good habits, make them attractive. And for bad habits, make them unattractive. One of the things I love about make it unattractive, because this was something I always had struggles when I was younger. I was a nail biter and could not break the habit. And perfect example of making it unattractive is there was something that you could buy in the stores that you would paint onto your fingernails that made them taste like absolute garbage. That's unattractive, right? How do you take a habit that you're trying to break and make it completely undesirable? That's perfect example. On the flip side of that, if you wanted to make something attractive, let's say that you wanted to spend more time in your schedule reading, but we're struggling to stay committed to that habit. Make the space where you go to read attractive and welcoming, place that you enjoy being, a place that sort of gives you personal pleasure, whether it's a special chair in your home or a park around the corner, or maybe it's a certain time of day, but make it attractive. Easy versus hard. I think that's a big one, because a lot of us tend to make things hard. And to Inez's point earlier, just getting up and doing something. We spend too much time saying how hard it is rather than just trying to make it easy. So what does that mean to make it easy? Lynette, you said you like to use a to-do list, putting it on paper, giving yourself that sort of visual focus for what you want to accomplish in a day. That's a great one. I think another one, making it easy, is meal prepping. If you're trying to work toward healthier eating habits, maybe one day a week, you create a habit where you are portioning out food or making recipes that all during the week make it easier for you to commit to that goal because you've put in some of the work ahead of time that you don't even have to think about it, sort of on autopilot, as opposed to making it difficult. Phone, again, is a good one. Get it, don't keep the phone next to your nightstand. If you're finding it hard to sort of shut that part of your life off to get a restful sleep, remove the phone from your view. Don't just leave it in your bedroom, put it in another part of your house or your home. Maybe if you're struggling with smoking, find habits or actions that can make it harder for you to either buy or smoke cigarettes. Okay, that's an idea of contrast of easy to difficult. And then make something more satisfying or less satisfying. I think a great thing in terms of reward is that if you achieve certain things, having a reward jar so that maybe every time that you recognize that you're spending way too much on other people's coffee. So maybe every time that you make your own coffee and avoid that $5 or $10 expense every day, maybe you take some or all of that money and you put it into a reward jar that can be used for another purpose, maybe to buy yourself a special gift or something for your home or something for your business, but that you recognize that there's a reward that you're working toward as a result of moving away from that expensive or undesirable behavior. Okay. So as you go back, look at your scorecard and you're examining that chunk of your day where your routine, where you see opportunity to improve, think about where your negatives are and how you can come up with obvious, attractive, easy, or satisfying actions to help you move towards the positive, good habits, or what is causing you to look at that habit in a negative way. What is causing you to see that action negatively, okay? And address that and make it harder or remove it from existence in your day-to-day. Okay, so that's sort of the heart of what James Clear is trying to explain. In doing that, he's got some tips and tricks, which I think are interesting, that he says will enhance your chances for success. The first one is habit stacking. Recognizing that if you pair something that you are not as well committed to with something that is a great part of your routine, that you're likely to have success. So let's go back to what's going on in the morning. Maybe if weighing ourselves is a good habit or a bad habit, but we're doing something that we know is good, maybe say brushing our teeth. Maybe we're really good about brushing our teeth, but really stink at flossing. Okay. Maybe what you do is as you habit stack, that you are now, instead of looking at those as two separate activities, that you recognize and sort of commit to the idea that they're always going to happen together, that when you brush your teeth, you will also floss. Okay. That's an example, sort of on a very elementary scale, of habit stacking. The other thing to keep in mind is that sometimes when you're looking at your habit, you are focusing on the wrong thing as the decision moment of when the habit is working for you or not. So what do I mean by that? I'm sure that sounded pretty vague. Let's take going to the gym. Your goal, your habit might be that you want to get a workout in every day. And so you might think in your mind that the moment that you're standing in the gym, actually starting the workout, is the moment that you're showing commitment to that habit. But maybe in reality, the moment that you're showing commitment to that habit is the moment that you get into the car before you leave the house. Or maybe even take it a step further. Maybe the moment that you're committed to that habit is the moment that you change into your workout clothes. That if you change into your workout clothes, the odds are slim to none that you will abandon your goal of getting to the gym in that moment. Maybe the odds are when you get into the car that it's, the chances are slim to none that you will abandon the drive to the gym. So it's, as you look at your habits, it's about recognizing where in your routine is the moment that you either are fully committed to that next step, or where you see distraction and where you don't see enough sort of conversion, if you will. If part of your problem is that too often you are driving to the gym and you end up diverting somewhere else, either you end up going to the office or you stop and run errands, and then before you know it, you are disinterested and unmotivated to go to the gym, then that tells you a lot about how you should consider tweaking your habits, changing your cues, changing your routine to get greater success. Okay. The other thing that he talks about, which I think is a great strategy, going back to the idea of don't do all or nothing in your habit mindset. Okay. If you wait for your perfect environment, if you wait for the setting to be ideal, and if you only allow yourself to do things that are absolutely guaranteed to be perfect in their outcome, then you won't get started. So James Clear's idea is, let's start small. If your goal is to read more, don't go with something so broad and big where there might be greater opportunity for disappointment or feel like you're falling short, or opportunity for distraction to get in the way. Maybe what you do is you bring it down to something very small, like I will read a page a day. I will read a chapter a day, as opposed to I will read more. He says, bring it down to a 2-minute activity. He actually talked about a person who, in his book, who was on, they lost several hundred pounds, but they were on a journey where they were struggling to get committed to a positive routine. And the gym was a big one. That the idea of getting to the gym and being in that environment felt like it was a lot to take on. And it felt like because there was so much weight to lose that the mountain was daunting, if you will. But when he employed James's 2-minute rule, what he started doing was just getting to the gym. Just get to the gym and spend 2 minutes in the gym. Well, if you can go and spend 2 minutes in the gym, once he did that for a week or two, his mindset started to shift. He's like, well, if I'm here, then let me spend 5 minutes at the gym, or let me just try one activity in the gym. And before you know it, that, along with habit stacking, without him necessarily even realize he was habit stacking, grew that habit to be bigger and bigger, to get him closer and closer to his desired result of weight loss. Okay, so the idea is, don't be so huge that it feels unattainable, and make sure that you're, recognizing the places where you're good in your life, having success in your world, and leverage those to help you get closer and closer to the pin, if you will, in areas where you're feeling a little short. And then the other thing I like, he says there's a Goldilocks rule. Don't go for too hard. Don't go for too easy. You're looking for just right. those habits that are maybe going to challenge you a little bit, get you out of that uncomfortable space, but are not so hard that you're going to experience more discouragement than joy as you accomplish and execute on those habits. Okay. And then the other set of ideas that he gives is building in accountability. If you go back to my mindset on business planning, this is a huge component for me of business planning because if you don't build in accountability, then everything you do, vision, mission, and your goals, they just get put in a drawer until somebody comes to you next November and says, okay, it's time to build your business plan. Okay. So accountability these are ways that you are going to hold yourself to moving closer to your desired state. A lot of times that does mean pairing up with someone, right? That, let's check in with each other once a month, once a week. Let's have a 15-minute call. Let's talk about what's going right, what's going wrong. And that's not about judgment. That's about you just feeling like, okay, I know I'm going to have to check in on this, and I know I'm going to have to express my results. I'm going to have to stand up and talk about what went right and wrong. I can't put it off or put it out of my mind and not deal with it. That's the idea of accountability. One of the things that I really like in what the author suggests is tracking your success. If any of you have young people, especially when my kids were a little bit younger, maybe about 5 to 10 years ago, there was this app, I think it was Snapchat, but I'm not 100% sure, where the big thing was that you went on streaks and you messaged somebody every single day. And once you got into a rhythm and you were building a streak of, so many days in a row that you snapped each other or chat, I don't even know what you call it, right? But the idea was neither person wanted to break the streak. Same idea if you are familiar at all with manufacturing, that you'll oftentimes see operational plants that talk about how many days they've gone accident-free, right? Don't break the streak. So if the goal there is to be a safe physical space, then as you enjoy more and more success, then everybody feels more invested in not being the person to break the streak of so many days with no accidents, right? That's the idea with habits too, that if you're tracking it somewhere on a calendar, if you're either checking off the day or making note in a journal, but putting somewhere that I did it again today, I did it again today, I did it again today, whatever my habit was, whatever that 2-minute activity that maybe grew to a 5-minute activity, whatever that was, if I'm enjoying success of any kind in that habit, let me give myself credit for it and put it on paper so I don't break the streak. Okay. So let's wrap up and let's talk about what the big takeaways are in James Clear's book. The idea, again, atomic, tiny, get 1% better every day. Because if your focus is to be 1% better tomorrow in a specific area or part of your life where you're maybe feeling a little bit frustrated, 1% better gets you closer to your ideal than nothing at all. Okay. To the point that we've heard multiple times this morning, don't wait for the perfect environment. Don't wait for the perfect system or the perfect plan. The best thing that you can do if you're feeling this pull and tug of good habits and bad habits in your life is to just start taking action. Get into the game. Give yourself the opportunity to learn more about yourself and what works and what doesn't. Ramp up your accountability level over time, and you'll start to see the benefit of good habits. And then what I think is another really big takeaway, I remember when I was younger and going through business school that they talked so much about how you needed 21 days to form a new habit, 21 days, 21 days, 21 days. But what James Clear really talks about is it's not the time factor in and of itself that really establishes a habit. It's the frequency. It's the at-bats. It's the number of times that you give yourself the opportunity to execute on that habit or that behavior or that routine that are going to give you the greatest chance for success. So my encouragement to you today is to think about that sort of big picture, reflect on some of the quality messages that came out of Steve Covey's book about relationship, mindset, you know, abundance mentality, working with others, enjoying the synergies of working with others. That's huge. And then the second piece, think about the science of your day to day. Think about what your routine looks like. Find one segment of your routine that you'd like to improve, and find small, tiny, meaningful ways that you can adjust your behaviors or your routines to get you closer to where that place where you want to be, to get you closer to your vision statement of your ideal you. Okay. So I hope that you found some value in hearing about these two books today. Maybe you're inspired to go and read one or both of them. Maybe you want to head over to the authors' websites to learn more about their background and some of the other resources that they make available to their followers. But no matter what, I hope that the last 60 seconds have inspired you a little bit. Think about making some of those small, meaningful changes that can have an impact on you. One of the things that I will tell you, like I think a big thing for me in my morning routine is that I identified that the snooze button was currently, not always, but sort of where my routine has evolved probably over the last 6 months, is not my friend. So I've identified small ways that I can correct that, whether it's moving the phone across the room, or I found a way to change the number of minutes between snoozes so that it becomes less desirable. It becomes unenjoyable to hit the snooze button because it's only going to, start ringing 60 seconds from now. So that's your takeaway for today, is go and identify those negatives and find ways to slowly but surely shift those to positives that get you closer to where you want to be. Anybody have any thoughts or ideas that you want to share, or maybe even another publication that might be a good one to throw into this habits mix?
Deanna, what I did to help modify my use of the phone is that I gave specific people ringtones that I will answer their call. Everyone else has, a generic ringtone. So I'm not jumping and answering the phone every 5 minutes. Like the family has a ringtone. So I know if someone, one of my kids or a granddaughter calls, I answer their call. Everybody else goes into, I'll get back to you. And something else I find too, that I find frustrating in this business, to call someone and their voicemail is full. That grinds my gears. So
I agree with you.
I take time every day. I got to clear out the voicemail, because if the voicemail is full, what is the purpose?
Yep. That's a great point. So you've built in small but meaningful activities to make sure that you're at your desired state. Those special ringtones prevent you from having to stop to look at the phone, especially if you're in the middle of something, that just hearing the ringtone tells you what you need to know so that you don't lose momentum in whatever you're working on. That's great. You're moving closer to your ideal of eliminating distraction. Also, by checking your voicemail every day, making sure that you're cleaning it out. Your ideal is to make sure that you are accessible and available to your clients, so that if you can't get to their phone call, they need to be able to leave you a message that's important to you. You value it in your business, as most people should, but don't. I agree. But so you've built in part of your routine to speak to that. So absolutely, those are perfect examples of where you're checking sort of the positive boxes of good habits. So keep that going and find ways that if there are things where you're frustrated, that you can leverage those positives to bring those other, sort of falling short places more in line. And I also
reduce the technology being a distraction, because
it can definitely, yeah, I agree. I agree with you. If a lot of people looked at certain chunks of their day, they probably would agree. Now, not everybody, because remember, what's meaningful to you and what your ideal is going to be different from the next person. And for some people, their real estate business does rely heavily on, say, social media or social media interactions, or, connecting with people online through different apps like LinkedIn, Facebook. So what's important or not important to you is completely relative. And so there's not a matter of judgment here. It's just a matter of, I think what's most important is that you have to understand who you are and what is important to you. If you can't get that as your starting point, then how do you figure out whether your habits and routines are serving you well or not? The other thing I saw, Gail, you mentioned having a list and then crossing things off. For me, I agree with you. That's a tremendous reward. That if I start my day with a to-do list, the actual act of crossing something on the list is very rewarding to me, mentally rewarding. So I agree with you there. The one challenge that I have is that I make my to-do list impossible in a given day. And so if I were looking at my habits, I would say that's a negative, is that I just put anything and everything on that list. And then I'm constantly at the end of the day feeling like maybe I felt a little bit short because I didn't accomplish as much as I wanted to. So maybe I have to find habits that help me better align my expectations day to day to achieve success and feel rewarded. So great point there. Anybody else? Jim, that's a great point. A silence button on toddlers. I went through 4 of those myself, and I unfortunately never found what one of those was. So good luck. If you do, make sure that you bottle it and sell it, because you'll definitely have a market for it. All right, great. Well, hopefully you've taken something away from today with habits, that you've gotten some food for thought, and maybe you're going to go and take some action today. Get off the sidelines and start thinking about those small atomic ways that you can get closer to your ideal. So good luck, everybody. Get going with your habits. Remember, next week, we're going to do buyer agency. And also, too, I'll take a quick second to tell you that we're going to do another book mashup in late December. I think maybe the week before Christmas. We're going to take a look at the 5-second rule, which is Mel Robbins. And we're going to look at Just Shut Up and Do It, which is a Brian Tracy book. Brian Tracy, who has written a lot of sales books that are common reads in and among real estate circles. So hopefully you'll take a look at these 2. If not, you'll join us on our upcoming Wednesday session and just get the best of both of these books. And it'll give you some good action items, again, to get into that great mindset going into next year. Perfect time to evaluate your habits, get yourself mentally motivated to start a new year and hit 2024 running. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, Diana.
Thank you. Have a great, great day, everybody. And good habits.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.